There are just 100 days until the midterms, and there's a clear and present threat to American democracy, thanks to a slew of far-right conspiracy mongers and avowed Christian nationalists that are running for office in this country. The National Democratic Redistricting Committee, the Democrats' main political group that's focused on redistricting, is expanding its scope for the midterms and working to defend election administration offices from these Trump-backed extremists. And that's excellent news. We should applaud that. But it seems to be in stark contrast with the efforts of some Democrats to actually boost the profiles of anti-democratic MAGA cult candidates. Some Democrats are effectively bankrolling the same radicals that they're warning about, hoping that they'll be easier to beat in general election races than the more moderate mainstream Republicans. Now, as history shows, efforts like this are prone to backfiring and are dangerous. Consider the case of George Christopher. In advance of the 1966 California governor's race, George Christopher served as the popular moderate Republican mayor of San Francisco. Democrats recognized that he would be a formidable threat in the general election, so they leaked a trove of opposition research to the press and backed his more far-right GOP primary opponent. Guess what? That far-right rival won the primary, but then he won the general election as well, and he'd eventually used his time as governor to run for president. That candidate's name? Ronald Reagan. Joining me now to discuss her group's efforts and more is Kelly Burton, the president of the National Democratic Redistricting Committee. Kelly, it's great to have you with us. Your organization is working to combat anti-democratic candidates across the country. Tell us about what the NDRC is doing in this current climate.
Well, thanks for having me here to talk about this. I think, as you have noted throughout this show, with 100 days left, there is one thing that is very clear, and it is that democracy is on the ballot. And we have been fighting for years to realize fair maps through the redistricting process. But we know that if we don't have free and fair elections, we can't fully realize the impact of those fair maps. That's why, as soon as the map drawing process was done, we launched an expanded electoral program that hones in on some of the most important elections that we all need to care about, not just for protecting and ensuring fair maps, but also for protecting our democracy. It's 17 states. It's everything from governors to secretaries of state, Supreme Court races, as well as state legislatures. And all of those will be incredibly important in this fight to save and protect our democracy.
So, Kelly, what's your reaction to the Democrats, in some cases, boosting the profiles of some of these anti-democratic figures? Do you think that the Democrats are playing with fire by trying to push through, or at least, focus on targeting these far-right extreme candidates with the hopes that they can paint the Republican Party with this broad brush and then ultimately face off against them in a general election?
Well, I've spent a lot of time inside those committees where those decisions are made. And one thing I've learned is that you really can't judge their actions from the outside. We're not all seeing the information that they're seeing. We're not working with the details of the races that they are. So I can't speak to that strategy specifically, but I will say that, elections are about choices, and it is very clear in this election that there are two very stark differences between the two parties on the ballot. And we have a saying at the NDRC and also in my own home that you got to keep the main thing the main thing. And the main thing in this election is that you have one party, the Republican Party, that absolutely is supporting candidates who are election deniers, supporting candidates who were at the January 6th insurrection, who continue to believe that Biden is not the legitimate president of this country. And those candidates are running as Republicans, and they are being elected by Republican Party voters. And that is the heart of the matter here. That is what's happening in our nation. And that's the real heart of what is threatening our democracy, is that you have one party that really, as my boss, Eric Holder, recently said in his new book, just ain't that into democracy right now. And hopefully that doesn't, last forever. And they're having a real reckoning within their party. But that is the heart of the matter, that this is a Republican Party that is not supporting democracy. And you have Republican candidates that are questioning the structures of our democracy and Republican voters that are voting for them. And that's what we need to stay focused on. And that's why we're supporting democracy defenders up and down the ballot.
Let's talk about Congressman Peter Major for a moment. He was one of 10 Republicans who voted to impeach Donald Trump for his actions around January the 6th. And now some Democrats are backing his Trump-endorsed far-right opponent. Talk us through your thoughts on this one.
Well, I think what you're seeing here, again, I can't speak to the specific strategy and to the data and the details that the DCCC and others are looking at with this race, but this is one of the districts that got more fair in redistricting. Michigan was the congressional map in Michigan was drawn by a commission. It's far better and fairer than it was last decade when it was gerrymandered by a Republican legislature. So overall, this map is more fair, and this is a district that went from a Biden 48 district to a Biden 54 district, which means Democrats should win this district. You know, I have to imagine this is a must-win district for the DCCC, and no matter who wins the Republican primary on Tuesday, I'm sure they're going to be all in to elect the Democratic candidate in this district, no matter who wins on the Republican side.
Let me switch gears, if I can, and talk to you about a new report from Bloomberg, which found that because of redistricting, the 22 majority black congressional districts that currently exist could be whittled down to as few as 9 after the midterms. Your reaction to that?
I mean, look, it's a real concern overall. And the thing to know and to really dig in on when you're looking at these numbers is that that is largely driven by an intentional strategy by the Republicans to go after black elected officials, to go after black majority and black influence districts in the map. The reason for the decline is largely because of the way that the Republicans drew their maps in states like Florida and Georgia and Ohio and Texas, where 95% of the growth in Texas came from people of color, but the Republicans drew more white majority districts than they had last decade. Similarly, in Texas, where Governor DeSantis's congressional map directly went after the districts of Congressman Watson and the district held currently by Congresswoman Demings intentionally in order to go after those members and the representation of the black voters in those districts. So this was an intentional strategy by the Republicans, and that is why we are continuing to fight back against what we think are illegal maps. We are in court still fighting against those maps in states like Florida, Georgia, Texas, Ohio, and the states, for example, Alabama and Louisiana, where the legislature just refused to draw an additional black majority district that should be drawn based on the population of those states. So we're fighting in court on all those maps, and we don't accept this as the final number for the decade. We'll keep fighting.